podcast for heroes in the world of Overwatch. This is The Payload.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 27 of The Payload. We are an Overwatch podcast from blizzpro.com. From Denver, Colorado, I am John Horstman, and with me, of course, the crew. First, Ventura, California, Jimmy Bloxham. Hey Jimmy, welcome back, you dirty, filthy traitor.
It's so good to be back. Last week, I actually was sick as well as going to the Warcraft movie.
Yep.
So I got to play a good amount of Overwatch. So we'll have a lot to talk about in the world of Overwatch this week. So I'm excited to be talking about it with you guys. I got to listen to last week's show and it was great. Great job without me.
Yeah. I know, we had to just kind of really muster up everything that we had and then channel our inner rage at the thought of Jimmy seeing a movie instead of being here and just unleash it like a Hanzo ult. From Saskatoon, Canada, it's Kevin Obdestad. Hey, Kev.
Hey, John. Yeah, it took me a while to charge up the adequate amount of fury at Jimmy's absence, but I think we managed. Nice. We did a pretty good job.
Let's keep this going, by the way, all day.
It's now you're stuck with it, guys. It's the whole show.
Nice. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us for episode number 27. 27 whole episodes. The show is now older than I am, which is kind of neat. So let's jump in, but first let's talk about our weeks. Jimmy, tell us about your week.
Played a lot of Overwatch. Just good. Every time I get onto Overwatch, someone's there ready for adding another person to their party or whatever. So I always get an invite. It seems like I have not played a single game of Overwatch, at least on PC, solo yet. So it's been a really, really great experience today. I'm surprised a bit the lasting power of this. I know it's only been a couple weeks since launch, but everyone is still trucking on it, and there's just the quick play mode. So I think this says really good things about the longevity of the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be insane. We're obviously going to touch on some numbers later on in this show coming out from Blizzard themselves, as well as some preliminary numbers in Korea. But first, Kev, how was your week in Overwatch, man?
Pretty good, except for the fact that I just didn't get to play the game at all. So the problem, unfortunately for me, is we did the show last week, you and I, in Jimmy's absence because he's a bad person. And then I proceeded to spend a little bit of time getting ready because I was away. I've been away the last 4 days in Ottawa, capital of Canada. I was there doing a presentation at a summit on esports in Canada and sort of the future of like legalization around sports betting for esports and stuff, which is very cool. And I may actually be getting to go back and do more work with the Canadian government around how they want to handle esports, which is kind of surreal. But
that's awesome.
It didn't. Yeah, it was really cool. And, anybody who wants to learn more about it or like geek out about it with me, like we'll do that another time on a stream or something. But it didn't leave me a whole lot of time for playing Overwatch this week. So, and my TV is dying, which is making playing on Xbox super frustrating. I have this big, beautiful 58-inch plasma TV and the panel's starting to die on the right-hand side. So I got to just kind of like muscle through for a little while and then go replace my TV.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
That's like the worst feeling in the world when like a TV goes out. Like a monitor you can replace. You're like, oh, I'll get another monitor. A TV is like, oh, do I really want to even buy the TV at this point? As for me, played a lot of Overwatch, playing a little bit on each. So playing quite a bit of PC, quite a bit of console, and it's been pretty fun. So yeah, I think I'm getting there. I'm finally getting the hang of things, which is kind of nice. Like it's still, that feeling when you got on PC and you didn't really feel comfortable. So half the game was trying to get comfortable and the other half was trying to learn maps, and it doesn't really feel like you're playing. When you switch over to console, you kind of have that same kind of feeling again, except the maps better. But like figuring out all the buttons again and stuff has just been kind of weird. But finally hitting the stride. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Well, we've got a lot to talk about this week, so let's jump into the news.
This week in Overwatch.
Tons of stuff this week. But first, the big news. Overwatch has surpassed 10 million active players. That's huge. It's a lot of players. And I believe we've got even, I don't know, this feels like bigger news to me than just 10 million players, but there's something going on in South Korea with Overwatch. Is that right?
Yeah. So traditionally in Korea and in a lot of Asian and Southeast Asian countries, people don't actually buy the rights to copies of the games for themselves, right? It's more common and sort of a cultural thing that you go out and you play games with people in places where you can enjoy it as part of like a larger group. And it's also a byproduct too of how the legality works for certain games. There's a lot of rules about kids can't stay up past a certain hour playing video games, so they can't have access to them in the home. And it's a whole thing, right? Culture is very different. But in Korea, they have these arcades, cafes. They're called PC bongs, and in a PC bong, you can go in and you can play whatever game, and that's actually a factor in terms of how the developers get paid. Basically, for every hour you play a game, 20 cents or so of that cost goes back as a licensing fee back to the developer, and it's a huge bellwether for which games are popular and successful in Korea, because it's basically the majority of the people who are playing a game in effectively the throne of esports worldwide. And for the first time since League of Legends peaked and beat the original StarCraft out almost 4 years ago, something has dethroned it, and it's Overwatch. Just today, the stats are out that Overwatch overtook League of Legends and is the biggest, most played video game in Korea right now.
Jimmy, I know you're also kind of huge into this, so what does this mean to you, man?
This just means that it's super, super popular in Korea right now, and being able to beat something like League of Legends, which has been so popular worldwide for so long and so many years now, I mean, that's just an incredible feat and achievement, and I think is a very good indicator for the health of the game. And I think for the esports side as well, it's a very good indicator, because if the more people you have playing and engaged in the game, I think you have the potential to have that much more of a pull for audience there. Blizzard obviously needs to do some other things to really support that, and they've done that in all their games, pretty much for the most part, as far as like in the launcher, promoting events in the game, it's splash screen itself in the game, having links to streams and stuff like that. So I think this is just a very good indicator for Overwatch.
Yeah, it's a crazy opportunity, right? Like, this is a serious indication that for the first time in a very long time, a game has come out that has the right mixture of features, right? Whether that's length of the game or how fluid it feels. It's got a lot of really positive things going for it, and it's poised right now to potentially dethrone League as the most popular game in the world. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything for Overwatch esports yet. I think we still need to know a lot more about what Blizzard intends to do to support it, whether that's the spectator stuff in-game or otherwise. But it's the opportunity, right? The fact that we even get to have that conversation, that hasn't happened since Brood War got supplanted by League of Legends when Twitch was barely a thing. Like, this is a huge thing, and it's a big shift. It's the first shift in the, second half of this decade. Like, it's crazy to me that this is happening, and I don't think anyone predicted it. Like, everyone knew Overwatch was good, it was fun, the beta was huge, but no one, if you had asked me before the game came out to predict this, not a chance.
I would have said
a million years.
I would have said that this had no chance of upseating League of Legends in Korea.
The first month that it's out.
Yeah,
like a year in, I'd have said give it a year and see how it does, but in the first month, forget it. There's no way.
Yeah, and while we're like really excited about this, I think it'll be interesting to see 6 months from now what the stats are like, and that will be, I think, really telling about just how excited people are for this game.
Yeah, it's definitely true that as far as getting people excited and hyped about Overwatch, Blizzard is absolutely 100% succeeded. I think these South Korea numbers really, really show that. The question is it just launch hype still, or is it something that can be prolonged. I really think that they've done it right, though. I'm really optimistic going forward.
I think we have reason to be optimistic. I mean, we're about to go talk about that, about how we're going to be optimistic with what Jeff Kaplan said. But yeah, I'm super excited for everything Overwatch going forward now.
Awesome. Really quick, something security based for you. If you are playing Blizzard games and you've got an authenticator attached, we've now gotten a new 1-button authenticator. And basically how it works is when you attempt to sign on, you open up your authenticator app on your smartphone, hit, yup, that was me. And now that's how you authenticate versus having to type in a code. So yay, quality of life improvements.
It's pretty more like it's more akin to how every other two-factor authentication system works. It's just better.
It really is, yeah.
And more for those of you who haven't used Blizzard's authenticators before, more in line with what you would expect from like your security on your Steam account or anything else that you may have tried otherwise. It's definitely an improvement. So worth looking into if you don't have one already. You can either get a physical fob. That's not as common anymore. Most people are just getting the app for their iPhone or Android device.
Yeah, they stopped giving those away at BlizzCon.
Yeah, well, because I mean, the cost of producing them is getting to be kind of unreal.
Silly.
Plus,
Yeah.
they've made millions of them. Don't forget, like, if you wanted one, it was not hard to come by one. I'm sure I've got like 6 in a closet somewhere.
No, I know I have a whole ton of them, and now I wonder. I want to go look and see if they're still available on the Gear Store. That would be funny. But yeah, just a great quality of life improvement to being able to sign into Battle.net. Good job.
Also, a great quality of life improvement is how often Jeff Kaplan has been posting in the forums. Made a pretty big, long post about the future content coming to Overwatch and what kind of the Overwatch development team is working on. Jimmy, you want to give us a rundown on this guy?
Yeah, I know you're going to
curveball.
Sorry, I was posting a leak in chat, but anyways, Jeff Kaplan really has been very good about communicating to the player base here, and I'm not going to read this whole thing. Everyone can go and read this themselves, but Jeff Kaplan responded to basically a post on the forums being like, "Hey, so what's going on with Overwatch? What's the future of Overwatch?" And he outlined in very broad terms that the focus right now obviously is on competitive play, and they're discussing internally about running PTRs for features like that in the future.
What do you guys think about that? So PTR in Overwatch to test different features, probably balance changes to things like that. Would you guys be on board with this?
Probably. I mean, I don't think there's any reason not to, and it's proven successful in all of their other games. Jeff did actually respond to the requests about PTR in the thread and basically made the joke, says, yeah, I worked on Blackwing Lair, so yes, we'll do PTRs.
Oh, geez, that's a real throwback.
Yeah, well, and kind of a dig at the people who are still working on that stuff in a way, but I thought it was funny.
No, that's funny because I remember how broken that was at launch. But yeah, continuing more, obviously focus on competitive play right now, but new heroes are at all sorts of various stages of development. It's nice to have it confirmed. I think everyone assumed that, but not a huge surprise there. And they wanted to say he wanted to get out in front of it though and say he can't make any sort of timeline predictions because things obviously change in development. They might need to change gears because of something happening in the game that needs to get fixed or whatever. So no promises on that front. New maps as well are at various stages in development. Not a huge surprise. One is officially in the pipeline for the game. And Kevin, I know you'll be excited for this. I think everyone will be excited for this, but spectator observer improvements are coming, and we all expected this. It's just nice to get a official confirmation on that.
Yeah, it's definitely something right now where if there's anything that holds Overwatch back, it's how we watch it, how we spectate those things. And I really think that if they are serious, they do need to take that spectator client to the next level in order for it to be a really enjoyable game to watch. Because right now it's fine, but a lot of it's carried more by the hype of I want to watch Overwatch versus Overwatch is a fun and easy game to watch, sit back on the couch and hang out like you would another like Hearthstone. Like I can throw up Hearthstone and just watch it all day. And so I hope they fix that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And back to spectator observer improvements. I know I talked about this after Agents Rising. I really hope that we get some sort of replay system in the game, because that's where you can really dig into the game and really learn strategies and really see a lot of different gameplay that you don't necessarily get to see on streams and stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And I think too, while we're just on this subject really quickly here, Overwatch might be the first example of a game where Blizzard still has the opportunity, because it wasn't a shipping feature and because they're not quite as saddled with the age of the engine. Like the Overwatch engine is brand new, right? This is something that was only started being developed maybe a few years ago. This could be the first time we see Blizzard do something like build the ability for you to watch esports into the game client itself. You might just be sitting there doing your thing and you'd be able to pop it open in game, which just thinking about the future of what they could do with this game makes me incredibly excited, because they just can't do it in any of the other existing properties.
Yeah, I mean, the infrastructure's already there in Overwatch. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but if you open up your social tab and look at who's playing, you can right click. And I don't know what determines if you can or can't spectate, but there's a right click and the spectate option there. I know in the beta for a little while it was available, but just being able to jump into your friends' games and watch them, that's awesome sometimes to just be able to do that. And it's a lot of fun. I know you do that already. If you join a group that's already in a game, you get to kind of just watch them play through their current game. But yeah, improving this on a larger scale or expanding this onto a larger scale would be something very, very welcome, I think, for the community.
Something I'm really excited about as well, kind of moving on to the next thing, is more improvements to highlights and plays of the game. Because while plays of the game are awesome, and when you get a play of the game, it's really fun. I am so sick of some of these plays of the game. I'm so sick of... Yes, JR's Torbjorn play of the games, walking down the hallway. Don't get me wrong, like it can be huge, but there's like so many times where it's like your team's making the final push to the payload and a Junkrat rips an ult and kills like half your team, and that's play of the game, even though you guys just all rezzed, went back up and marched it right down onto the end point and stuff like that. Like I think there's just so much more work to be done there, where they can find a way to figure that out. Because I'm all for losing team players getting play of the game sometimes, maybe, if it's really impactful, if it was an awesome thing, but not when it's like, oh, well, obviously they're trying to push the payload right now and they've got 3 people on there. So any combination of McCree, Diva, Hanzo, or Junkrat, or I'm sure there's others I'm forgetting, any combination of those alts all of a sudden get an automatic play of the game, despite the fact that team getting dominated the rest of the game. I just really hope that they find a way to figure that out and find that balance.
You know, the thing, and I know I'm going to be the most unpopular person on the internet for saying this, but I feel like play of the game could actually maybe work a little bit like the card system. And in some games, there just isn't a play of the game. Right? Like sometimes you get to the end of a match, nothing massively significant happened. There was no clear, like big swingy thing that changed the outcome of the whole game. It was just a game and it just happened. And sometimes you play a whole game and you're like, yeah, that was a good game. There was some back and forth. It was fine. There was no defining moment that changed the outcome. And if there wasn't one, like maybe the play of the game calculation needs to look at what's going on and say, okay, the threshold is 30%. And if all of the things that happen fall within that range of score in terms of what the value of what happened was, and nothing stood out, then maybe there just wasn't one. And maybe we don't have to have one after every game.
Just says, you all suck right across the front.
Good try. Please play again. Insert coin to continue.
Oh my goodness.
That would be that'd actually be pretty funny.
I just don't know that you need to have one after every game. That's all I'm saying.
It is true. Like if it's going to make people not feel great about the game that was played, then maybe it doesn't. Because at the end of the day, that's kind of the whole point is that at least your team should feel good. But even when I'm on the losing team and my guy pulls a Bastion out, and I'm like, man, they had so many good people on their team who did so many great things. Like, boo. Like, I don't like click past that or something like that.
It's like, I want to see something epic or nothing. And if I'm going to sit and I'm going to watch JR walk down a hallway as Torbjorn, or, watch a Junkrat tire go off for the 100th time, like, okay, whatever. But that was not the moment at which the game going one direction or the other was decided. And if it was, it's not significant enough to really call out.
Yeah. Last thing on the big long post is custom games. They're throwing around an idea for like a server browser where you can browse custom game servers, basically for you to play custom games without that person necessarily having to be your friend or having to go to a third-party website or tool to find a custom game. You can just kind of do it in. Obviously, there's some pretty heavy technological things that need to happen to make that work for a game as huge as Overwatch. We all remember the good old Counter-Strike custom servers back in the day where it's just an infinity list of just weird stuff. But Blizzard could do it, right? What do you guys think about a server browser in Hearthstone or Overwatch? Overwatch. Oops.
Cue me up with Dr. Boom. No, but yeah, I think this is super important for the health of at least the competitive scene. I feel like it would be better if there was something like this already in the game now, as we're trying to figure out what competitive format we're wanting to really play with. And this would just be easier for people to really tool around with that, with different rules and all sorts of different things. Like I know you guys talked about last week, the one hero limit per team. And that could just be something that would be really, really helpful for the competitive scene, and just queue up a custom game with these certain set of rules, and everyone else who wants to play that can join that game pretty easily. That would be something really cool to see.
I don't know that this actually fills much of a need. Like, I think the pro community pretty much already has their scrimmaging setup figured out. They don't necessarily need this. And for most people, right, you want Blizzard's matchmaking service because you want to play a game that's reasonably fair. That would be the huge thing, right? Is A, this would be PC only. B, you would have no control over the quality of the matches you would get. So you would be jumping onto a server to play with people you don't know, and likely as not, the games would be massively favored one way or the other. And I don't know. I feel like that might not make the game as interesting. It's hard to say. It probably has a use case, right? But I don't know that this is a high enough priority thing to take away from working on the portion of the game that matters to everybody, where you jump in and play a balanced match using Blizzard's matchmaking and Blizzard servers as opposed to third-party tools.
Right. And Jeff Kaplan even said in the post, like, it's in the research stage. Like, they're not implementing this anytime soon. I don't believe he alluded to it even being on any like internal builds. I believe he's just going to say, like, this is something we think might be really cool to do because, it would be nice. Like, there are a lot of times where I do want to play, imagine it's almost a little bit of like a tournament mode in a way, especially if the competitive scene strays away from what we see in competitive mode and quick play, as far as hero limits and even different, like using stopwatch as a scoring mechanism and things like that, where if we're seeing those things, I don't know, maybe there's just a way to make that more alive and active. And there are definitely games out there that have had successful custom server lists and things like that. So I don't think that they couldn't. I do think that there would definitely be people who would benefit from them, but I don't think that it's anything that people are crying out or asking for over, say, competitive mode, new maps, new heroes, balance changes, play the game stuff, all those different matchmaking, all those different things. Yeah. And one last thing before we jump into esports here is we got a new Overwatch patch, didn't we, Kevin?
We did, and this is really exciting. So we finally got to see changes, much needed changes to two characters that have been sort of on everyone's radar, McCree and Widowmaker. So the McCree change is actually a reversion of a previous change. They took McCree's Peacekeeper alternate fire back to the way it used to work. So the recovery time is lower. You can now use it again quicker than you could previously. But the bullet damage has been switched back down. So individual shots went from 70 damage per back down to 45. Now remember, alternate fire on Peacekeeper cannot headshot, so that's a fixed amount of damage based on hitting your target or not hitting your target. That basically takes a huge number of characters out of his deadly range and makes him, I would say, not like too weak, but definitely changes his role, particularly as a flanker. And even in the pro scene right now, what we're hearing is that they don't use him as much, and this has really actually pushed Pharah back into the spotlight as kind of the primary DPS, which is interesting. So that's one very big change, and I would say positive, guys. Like, we're not surprised here or upset by that at all?
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. I've been playing a lot of McCree. I mean, even knowing the knowledge that this was a change that was going to happen, not specifically what it was, but the change was coming. And yeah, being able to just double fan Roadhogs was just like, it brought a smile to my face, but I was like, this doesn't feel right. So it's a good change. And his left click hasn't changed at all. So, I mean, he'll obviously play a bit further back now, but he can still roll in stun lower health heroes like a Tracer or a Zenyatta and eliminate them.
Right.
Also takes Reaper out of range entirely, which is interesting too. Makes Reaper a way safer counter back to McCree again.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely still has a really strong ability to finish, but now he has to actually start too. It's not just run up, flash bang, fan the hammer, move on. Like that's not what it's going to be anymore. It's going to be a little bit more pap, 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 roll in, flash bang, fan the hammer, kind of stay with your team type thing. So I'm really excited for those nerfs for sure.
Yeah, nice too that it brings back the skill differentiation between regular fire and alt fire, right? Like if you get a flashbang off on a Tracer, a high level player is now more likely to try and use primary fire and get the headshots on the Tracer than use fan, because it's a more effective way to guarantee the kill because of the raw damage throughput, right? Fan becomes kind of almost a liability against certain characters. So that was the big one on the one side. The other one was Widowmaker. Widowmaker, they basically decreased base damage from 15 to 12, left the scope shot multiplier intact, increased the headshot multiplier from 2 to 2.5 times. So what you end up with is a net change of nothing for headshots, a slight reduction in body shots, and the body shot damage low enough now that you're not one-shotting anything in the game on a body shot, including even Zenyatta. Still dies in one shot as a headshot, but it's definitely, I think, a pretty welcome change. And actually, more significantly, you can't scope back in until the unscoping animation is complete. So the animation used to be kind of cancelable, and this is definitely
huge.
a huge change.
I think it's actually pretty big.
Also, a slight reduction in how fast her ult charges, which it's only 10%. Probably could have been more. Really glad to see that. John, thoughts?
I mean, honestly, like, it makes perfect sense. You shouldn't be able to one-shot, body shot multiple players in the game. Like, that just should not be a thing. How it even made it past that, I don't really know, but whatever. So totally get it. Honestly, one of the biggest changes, though, is that scope animation, because a big part of being a really good sniper is being really twitchy with that scope, being going in and out, moving fast, and obviously you move way slower when you're scoped in. So being able to do that really quickly is really important for a sniper. And not being able to do that is going to change how she's played. She's still strong. I don't know if this is strong enough. I don't know if this is enough to make Hanzo comparable or better. I don't really think so. But yeah, because I still think she's a superior sniper, but it's not like, oh, obviously, if you're going to snipe, you choose Widowmaker and anything semi-competitive. So love the changes. Definitely needed. And yeah, there's really not much more to say about that, I don't think, unless
Well, I was a minor thing, just because I know we didn't touch on it. This patch is done on PC, but Blizzard did indicate that the changes here are actually going to be rolled into a larger update that's coming on consoles later. And an exact date hasn't been published for that, so we don't know, but it's not in effect yet.
Probably
consoles.
Competitive play.
I would guess
guessing.
competitive play coming out later this month. If they're still on track for that, that means you're seeing that in the next week or two. It would make sense that it's going to be part of that singular larger update, because they can't get away with a weekly patch or a bi-weekly patch on console the way they can on PC.
Right. Okay, let's move on. We've got so much more to talk about yet. So moving into esports, Gamescom and ESL have partnered up to provide a $100,000 Overwatch tournament. That's a lot of money for a game this new. That's kind of exciting. What do you guys think about this? Is this the first big tournament finally? Are we finally getting serious here with Overwatch?
We're getting the serious money now. $100,000 prize pool is when you really start pulling in the sponsors, big names. They want to be a part of something this big, so it'll be interesting to see. I'm just really curious. I know it was just an announcement. Basically, I want to know what the heck the format's going to be for this, because Ghost of Gamers Weekly has been playing around with formats. Obviously, the most recent was the one hero limit, and I was opposed to it at first, but I actually really like it now in practice. So I that's my big question right now, is what is the format for this event?
Yeah. I mean, I guess personally, I don't love how big a deal we make out of size of prize pool, because frankly, it should be more important that the game is interesting and draws enough audience to ensure that players are getting paid a livable salary and all the rest of that kind of stuff. But I mean, at the end of the day, whether or not people watch tournaments often comes down to how good is this prize pool. Is the big money on the line? Are we going to watch someone hoist a check for $50,000 or $100,000 at some point in the year? And it's also a pretty good way to look at what's popular between esports. So if one tournament's getting a prize for $100,000, another one's getting a prize for $10,000, the $100,000 one is probably more popular, has more players, has more viewership. It does tend to correlate pretty cleanly to those things. So it's a big deal that it happened, and again, that it happened so fast. We weren't seeing $100,000 tournaments in Heroes of the Storm or Hearthstone or any of the other Blizzard properties this fast, nor in any other recent game that's come out that I can think of, and especially not unless it was from the developer. Like, yeah, sure, you saw Smite get a gazillion-dollar prize pool because the Smite devs were trying to push it. Microsoft throws $1 million Halo championship, but this is a big third-party event, and obviously also, if Blizzard is serious about Overwatch, they're going to turn around and they're going to throw $1 million or $1 million plus tournament at BlizzCon to keep up with all of their other properties. I think this is healthy. But you're right. The format is really the big question still.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of what I was thinking when we were talking about what is Blizzard now going to do in response to this for BlizzCon. Obviously there's going to be something at BlizzCon for Overwatch, esports here. The bar has already been set for $100,000 prize pool, so it can only get bigger than here. So they're really just going to have to hit the ground running here as far as Blizzard Esports versus what they did with Heroes of the Storm, where it was a pretty slow rollout. I mean, 6 months into it, it was a little slow, but we'll see.
I mean, this definitely tells me a couple things. Number one, it means that the response of Overwatch is large enough that people that aren't Blizzard are willing to invest $100,000 into seeing what this could do. Now, to Kevin's point, just because there's money behind something doesn't mean it's going to be great. We saw that with some like Hearthstone leagues last year and things like that, where there was a lot of money at stake and some decent players, but they missed that magic piece that made it so watchable and something that you wanted to enjoy and talk about. But it definitely does vouch well for the game in being that. I think format, as you guys have said, is going to be really interesting. Probably why they didn't announce it, because I bet you they're waiting to see more and more as competitive play comes out, as these other tournaments are coming on through the next month or so to do that. I believe that they start some qualifying rounds and things like that at the middle of July. I believe is what it said, somewhere like halfway through July. So They'll have to kind of give us a format pretty quick, but I think it makes sense that they're still waiting on it, because even then, every week we talk about new formats and changes to the competitive scene going on. Kev, I think we also had a couple of new signings this week that you kind of updated on the show, didn't we?
Yeah, two that I wanted to touch on. The first one is Splyce have picked up a team that used to go by FIGM. I don't remember what the acronym stood for. So they've picked up a really good competitive team and become pretty significant. Their presence now, like Splyce as an organization, is in a lot of games. And their Overwatch roster looks pretty good. They've got guys like Papa Smurf, and that's a pretty scary looking roster if you've watched any of these guys stream. Their team has played a few of the smaller tournaments under the old name and did pretty well. The second one, actually, the one I really wanted to talk about because I think it's a little more interesting, is Selfless Gaming. So Selfless has picked up a crew of 6 players, and interesting because one of them is my friend Rebecca. So on the list of players, you'll see Rebecca Istabo, or Sakari is her name in game. She's actually a former Blizzard employee, and of course, because you've heard me say it, a girl. She's a young woman in her like mid-20s or whatever, playing on this pro team, and very, very impressive watching them play at like the pro level. It's kind of unreal. So I'm really excited to see where both of these organizations go, since Overwatch is one of those games that in its infancy, kind of anybody could turn out to be the best. We don't really have a good idea yet. And I think it's going to be really exciting to see just how diverse the game is going to be with so many teams and so many different types of people playing it.
Yeah.
Also, she might come on the show maybe at some
That
point
would be
to come and talk pro stuff with us. So
deal.
Yeah.
I'll consider that confirmation, Rebecca, if you're listening.
I'll let her know.
Oh, yeah. And I also add something really quickly about Overwatch in esports. There's a report coming out of the UK that both Fnatic and Manchester United, you heard me right, yes, Manchester United, the soccer club in the UK, are in a bidding war over an unspecified Overwatch team, which is just insane when you think about it. The game is really early on. I mean, we have this $100,000 tournament announced, but beyond that, we don't know much about the future of Overwatch. But these are two big organizations, one of the biggest organizations in esports and one of the biggest organizations just in sports in general is going after an Overwatch team. I find that to be incredible. And I mean, obviously this is just rumor and speculation, but just the idea of a soccer club like Manchester United going after an Overwatch team just blows my mind.
It's kind of huge. I mean, Kev, I feel like you writing about esports for so long, I feel like you'd have a really good read on what this may or may not mean for Overwatch as far as its legitimacy, as well as helping kind of bring together esports and traditional sports and what that kind of looks like.
For sure. There's two things I think that are really important, right? One is traditional sports have decided that there's a lot of good visibility to be gained by being involved in esports. It's not massively lucrative. It's not a place where you're going to find the absolute be all and end all to make your particular franchise more profitable in terms of any direct revenue, right? Ticket sales or merchandise or any of that sort of thing. But it's a huge opportunity to get your brand and your information in front of a demographic that you don't talk to otherwise. Most of the people who are big fans of traditional sports, spending big money on long-term tickets, season tickets and stuff like that, they're upwards of 35. And most of the people watching esports are 18 to 35, right? It's just a demographic shift. So it's how they become relevant and stay relevant with a younger demographic. The second thing is esports in general, it's very difficult to break into an established game. You don't see anybody at this point trying to get into creating the world's best Dota team to go win the international this year. Who's good at that game and where they're going to be is pretty well established. The closest thing you see is people buying out existing franchises. And that's kind of what this is, right? If Man U or any of the other people, because there are others that are doing similar things, decide they're going to get involved, typically how they do that is they just throw money at the problem, spend a couple $1 million and acquire the best talent, which is really, like you said, exciting in terms of legitimacy. It means that these teams are going to get players that get real salaries. They can sustain it. They can make it their pure focus. They're not going to be reliant on whether or not they get that $100,000 contract for sponsorship to make sure that the players can eat. Like it's a really cool time. And I think the more of this that continues to happen, the more likely it is that we also see the infrastructure to have good long-term sustainable leagues and that kind of stuff, because that's what makes regular sports tick, right? That's why they work, is because they have the big organizing bodies and the consistent leagues with consistent schedules and regional representation. That's the kind of stuff that would make Overwatch really sort of the flag bearer for esports going into, 2020 and beyond or whatever.
Awesome. Woo. Kevin dropping some knowledge.
Woo.
Sometimes he gets in that zone and I just kind of have to lean into it a little bit, stay into it, lean in, turn in. It's like a fastball coming right at your shoulder. You just got to kind of lean in and take the base. All right.
Not do the Jimmy and just go to the movies.
No, we got him. All right, let's go ahead and talk about our feature this week.
Faster than sight. So predictable.
Okay, so this week we're going to do something a little bit different. Last week on the show, John and I spent this time talking about the mobility in the game and kind of how you could take advantage of it, different places that you could do stuff. We got a ton of emails, so I just want to touch on it very briefly. Yes, we probably could have said May can use her ice wall to get to Hanamura Point B. Like 5 different people frantically let us know it was the thing we missed. But yeah, we had a really great conversation about mobility and all the things that means in the game. This week, we want to go a slightly different direction. We don't want to talk about current gameplay so much. We're going to talk about future gameplay. So the discussion this week is on new hero kits. And what I mean by that is we're going to talk a little bit about what we think Overwatch could do in terms of new characters as they add additional heroes to the game over time, which we already know is going to happen. It's not necessarily about what they will do, because we're not at a point where we have any information and we don't want to go through the rumors of what characters are being added. We want to talk more about the design ideas, what combinations could exist, what potential counters could be introduced, and what benefit that would bring to the game and kind of the lay of the land right now. So we're going to go through and look at gaps in what the current hero roster looks like based on a few different things. And we're going to start this conversation, I think, with the easy one, guys, which is role. So there are 4 roles: offense, defense, tank, and support. My position, I guess, is right now it would seem pretty obvious that there are the least supports. Support is the role with the least options to play, and there's not a lot of variety in supports, which leads to a lot of games looking very similar. You always have that Mercy, or you always have that Lucio. Having said that, they're also going to be the least played role, right? You're generally not going to see a ton of supports. Most teams want 1 in a game. So having an equal number doesn't necessarily make sense, because again, for variety purposes, you don't want multiple of the same heroes on offense or defense, and then a whole spectrum of supports for your 1 support player to choose from. So role-wise, John, I'm going to throw it to you first. Which role do you think Blizzard should be adding characters to, and why?
Well, I'm going to approach it from 2 different ways. Number 1, I think they should split support into support and utility, and just take Zenyatta and Symmetra, and I think I would put it in utility. Maybe keep Zenyatta in support, but I would start by doing that. But really, I think a lot of the work needs to be done with support right now. More than anything, there's just, Kev, you laid it out really well. You can't really play a game super well, especially against a good team, without a Lucio or a Mercy. Just pretty much non-negotiable all the way through. Some of that is okay. Like, you typically need healers, and unless we start introducing players that can heal themselves, like Soldier 76, and start having that homogenized kit, then you're going to have to almost always have somebody who's doing some type of healing on your team. But you have a direct damage healer and you have an AoE healer, and that's basically how you do. You kind of have Zenyatta, who's almost like reminds me of like a holy paladin a little bit, where you put the beacon on the tank and then you just kind of go ahead and pew away. I really think that right now support And even then, maybe we treat specialist or utility or whatever as a separate category, but I feel like that area of the game right now probably is going to need the most amount of focus.
Sure, totally with you. I think that makes sense. Jimmy, thoughts? Did John miss anything that you disagree with?
No, I mean, it was pretty similar as far as what I was thinking. The support role obviously is a little bit lacking right now, but splitting that into like a utility role, I could almost think of something like a Tastar style, a character in Overwatch here that could really fill that. But yeah, support is going to be the one that most is going to be focused on, and then I think after that would be the tank role. There's really only a few tanks that are viable, I would say, at the top level. So maybe adding more variety would help, but I'm not sure what that all would entail. That's a whole nother discussion. I mean, that we're going down that path, but support needs to be addressed first.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think the one thing I would add is, and we're going to talk about this more as we go through the other factors, is that I'd like to see a little bit more variety introduced in terms of how people are dealing their damage on offense and defense. So, and Blizzard, to their credit, I'm sure will get this right. But if we add another healer, right, there's only so many ways you can do that. The healer can either heal one target or multiple. It can be it all has to be based on line of sight. Like it's kind of a formula they can't do a lot with. Whereas damage, there's a lot more room to say, okay, how many targets does this hit? Is it explosive? Does it arc? What is the way they're going to deal damage? Is it burst? Is it sustained? There's lots of ways that make that more interesting, I think. So on that note, one of the things I wanted to talk about in terms of kits, because I think we're all in agreement that we need to see particularly supports, is how characters work at range. And so when I say range, I literally mean how far away can you be from a target to either heal it, damage it, interact with it, just range in general. So a long range character might be somebody like Pharah, who's functionally infinite range. Medium range, we generally say like default, we assume is about Soldier 76's range, and he kind of functions well when he's not too close but not too far away. Like in-game tips say that, for crying out loud. And close range, I would use characters like Tracer or Genji, the characters that have to be kind of up in the thick of things, get close
Reaper.
to their targets. Yeah, exactly. So those are characters that just have to be right up in there. Based on the existing characters, guys, where do you want to see range go? Do we need more characters that can function at long range? Do we need more characters that can only really work if they're up close to people? What kind of spread needs to be introduced there? Because we've got a pretty good balance right now. Jimmy, I'll let you take this one first.
Yeah, I think we need to probably go more towards medium. I mean, if you lean more towards too many long range heroes, you're going to get these games that kind of just break apart and are not focused on the objective. I mean, for certain maps, maybe that will work, but like payload maps, that would just really not work on. I think having those medium range heroes is key for really balancing on the payload style maps here. And I guess you're a little bit pigeonholed because of the payload maps a bit, and having to really make sure that heroes can be effective for pushing this objective through checkpoints throughout the map. So I think medium would be a good compromise as far as how the game design is right now.
I think something too with this, it's kind of like a rock, paper, scissors thing where, you know, those up close heroes obviously get wrecked by snipers. You get them in an alley, they're done. Those medium, you know, pace heroes can really do well against long range. And then of course the long range, you know, do well against short range. And it's kind of this rock, paper, scissors thing. I don't really know if range, and range is really important, but I think too, you know, everything from like the speed of a bullet to the spread to how it explodes is going to have a huge bearing on that. For example, McCree's like medium range, but his bullets are also instantaneous. There's no travel time. So wherever you click, that's where that bullet goes. That's very different than somebody like Genji, for example, who's got pretty slow travel time, or, you know, Lucio, where you've got that going. And so I really think that while range, short, medium, long, whatever. I think that those are all important things, but where I think how Blizzard will expound on range is through those other means like splash damage, or imagine some more AoE type damage, maybe being able to put something on the floor, kind of like what Junkrat does, but a little bit more like grenade bomby, kind of drop something, whatever, a comet coming down or something like that you can do to bring those in. And I think that might be a really interesting way to approach range as well.
Sure. Okay. So, I mean, I'm with you, right? Like Jimmy's point about medium, I think is valid. And there's a lot of characters right now that have range limitations, to your point, John, because of their projectile travel time. You look at a character like a Hanzo or a Junkrat or a Lucio, and like their ability to deal damage is inherently tied to how close they are to their target because of how long those projectiles take to get there. So you have a valid point there. Do you think that there's a particular way the game needs to go? Like, there are a lot of slow moving projectiles right now. Do we need more characters that actually get to deal immediate damage like a McCree or a 76? Do we need to have more people who can, at that kind of range, contribute to damage in a more meaningful fashion?
I think if you do too much of that, you end up either having to make the slow projectile guys too powerful, those projectiles too powerful, or they just stop seeing play. So I definitely think you have to be really careful with that, or find a way to make the other things value more than just travel time, right? McCree, no travel time, Soldier 76, no travel time. And while that's, good and well, maybe, and again, maybe you got something slow, but it's like an AoE. Think Junkrat's grenades. Stuff like that. I think a good, healthy balance of both, but I don't see them adding more instantaneous projectile heroes until they add. I would think they're probably going to add some more slower projectile heroes. And I feel like you might even need like a 2-to-1 balance almost always to make that happen, where you've only got just a couple medium range instantaneous shooting, like true DPS type stuff from them, I think.
Sure. I mean, I think I can get on board with that. And I would love to see them do more of that, right? I would love to see more projectiles that do fun things with physics, whether it's more characters like Junkrat who can lob projectiles that are gravity affected, more characters like Hanzo where they have abilities that can reflect off of surfaces and affect their range by how many times something can bounce off of a wall, right? Like there's lots of ways that you could make some pretty cool adjustments there. The one thing I did want to touch on, because I didn't get a chance to earlier, is there's a lot of characters that are very, very good at like that short to medium range. But outside of Reinhardt and arguably Genji, but really Reinhardt, we don't have a lot of melee, right? We don't have a lot of characters who are reduced to melee only. And that's a factor, I think, that would be very difficult to balance in this game, because every character technically has a melee, and keeping a character bound to doing combat in melee feels like it would be really oppressive in this game. But do you guys see a place for that long term? Adding a character that maybe has more gap closers, more mobility, and is really limited to melee even more than a character like Genji?
I think not Junkrat, Roadhog is a good example of a hero that's melee but not melee. Right, because in the end, to do real damage, you've got your medium shot, so it's not totally true. But basically, that shotgun shell, your primary fire, may as well be, a melee hit.
A Reinhardt hammer, yeah.
Yeah, and so for all intents and purposes, I think that, that's about as close as we got. I love melee, but I think we're seeing, there's actually, I forget the name of the game, but there was a game that was announced at E3 that's a multiplayer game that has like a melee dueling engine where instead of, just shooting, you're actually playing this melee type chess game of trying to beat your opponent in melee mode. And I think that's something that really is difficult to do if you don't have some sort of counteractive engine to do that. Whereas when you're shooting, you've got things you can hide behind and you have ways to move around or put up a shield or shoot back. Whereas in melee range, you can't really block a melee. I don't think there's actually anything in the game that blocks a melee shot, except shields. Reinhardt shield doesn't. So a Reinhardt
What
and a
about
Reinhardt, you go right through.
reflect? What does that do? Anything?
Reflect
melee?
doesn't. Yeah,
Okay,
reflect
I didn't
doesn't.
think so.
And so I think that it would be interesting, but I feel like they would need like a to and fro type of play, where it's almost like, imagine being able to counter a melee or something like that would have to be introduced into the game as well. If we're going to see melee become more of a thing than a guy swinging an axe or a hammer or having to just get up into point blank range in order to do anything meaningful.
Sure, yeah, and I mean, I agree with you. I think they'd have to find a way to do it with something character driven, maybe a melee that's not just a melee. It's got a bit of range. Think something like an Ivy sword from Soul Calibur or something, right? Something that has that sort of additional bit of range to it. So yeah, you're probably right. We'll keep going though, because we got a couple more things we want to cover before we call it a night here. The next factor I wanted to talk about, because we did put it in such specific laser focus last week, is mobility. So there's a lot of characters in the game that right now have that kind of medium mobility. You've got your Reapers, your Tracers, your Junkrats, your Winstons, where they can get around but not crazy fast. Very few characters that are mobility limited. Truthfully, it's just McCree, Bastion, the tanks, some of the tanks. Most characters have some pretty decent mobility options, and there's only a handful that are really high mobility. Guys like Genji, Widowmaker, I would argue Mercy. So there's a few characters that can really get around the map. What do you guys see as the future of the game? Do we need more characters that have more mobility? Or on the flip side, do we want to see characters that have even less mobility? Do we want to see another character that's Bastion-esque, not necessarily in kit, but in being totally limited to regular speed walk, regular jump, that's it, and gets major damage as a consequence of that?
I think sorry, go ahead, Jimmy.
Sorry.
I'll give it. I answered the last one. I'll let you go
I'd
first.
really like to see higher mobility in characters. I think the pace of the game would be a little bit faster that way, but and I just feel like maybe it's obviously a design decision, but if, especially on something like Numbani, if you die defending that first point, that walk back is forever. So I would like to see a bit more higher mobility characters, and I really would like to see some more characters that have verticality as well. I mean, we only really have Pharah as far as really vertical characters. So I think higher mobility would be something fun to see in the game. But it's obviously something very challenging to balance going forward here.
Man, I got to disagree. I think mobility is something where, I think high mobility punishes team players who don't go in with a team. So I think it punishes solo queuers because it's a high mobility. We've all had that, that Tracer or a Reaper that's just super agonizing your team, sneaking up behind, stealing a couple kills, going back. And it's something that needs to be very careful. At the same time, low mobility characters, to Jimmy's point, really suck. Like the word that keeps coming back to me is mobility. To me, a good mobility character is a character that has control of their surroundings in some way, shape, or form. They can manipulate, either jump on top, climb, move about to get there. They don't have to be ones that can skip across the map and, get all these crazy, moves, to get across the gap at Hanamura like May, which we forgot to mention last week. Thank you for the emails. This is my acknowledgement of that. But I don't know. I just feel like mobility in the end with characters that are too mobile, they either have to be so underpowered from how much damage they can deal to be not chosen. And I think sometimes in like solo, you see that with Tracer, like think of a bad Tracer, right? If a bad Tracer is kind of what I think of when I think of a highly mobile character who doesn't do a lot of damage. Obviously,
not a lot of bottom line impact. Yeah.
Right. And so I think that Blizzard is intentionally really careful about that. I don't want like another Bastion either, or Symmetra. Now, Symmetra changes things because she's got a teleporter, right? So even though she can't go fast, she makes everybody go back fast, and that's kind of a big deal too. But I don't know. I would like to see more mobility, but I feel like if mobility ends up equaling, junglers and gankers in Overwatch, that's not the type of mobility I want. But something like Pharah, right, where she can move around the map, manipulate where she is in her environment to get better shots, but at the same time isn't going to, I don't even know how to say it, isn't like going to really be able to just, destroy uncoordinated teams, especially in like solo queue. And they should be able to do that. Like, it's not just like, oh, well, we don't have a good team, so you shouldn't be able to do that. Obviously, that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is you should, in a team-based game, working as a team should matter. And if you've got one person who can destroy a team, that doesn't feel good. And it tends to be those high mobility characters that really can set it off the edge.
Sure. I mean, I think I agree with you. I would add, I guess, that I'm not as worried about Jimmy's point about verticality as I am about raw speed. We've seen already that speed is such a huge factor in the game right now. Speed is what's making Lucio, quite frankly, basically mandatory. Speed is why people are so fond of 76 and Tracer in low MMR, because they can just get around quicker. And that type of speed, I think we have to be careful about. We don't want there to be an arms race with run speed. We just can't afford for that to happen in the game. And that would be really, really bad for the game long term. It might be nice to see abilities that affect move speed spread around so that you can do that with other people that aren't Lucio. But that's a question for another day. One thing I do think I want to add is I would like to see just a little bit more variety in terms of what people can do with verticality, to Jimmy's point, around things like, add another character that has a double jump, or add a character that has a substantially better jump, maybe twice the amount of verticality that a normal jump has, but also includes elements like a wall hang, where you could hang off of a wall for a couple of seconds and use that position to do something, whether that's, plant some kind of trap or fire while you're
Spider-Man.
Yeah, Spider-Man-esque, right? Sure. I think there's lots of that kind of stuff that hasn't been introduced to the game yet that would make being able to keep track of what's going on vertically important. Because right now, really and truthfully, unless you're looking for a Widowmaker or picking off a Pharah, you don't really care what's happening above you in this game. And I think that that's something that over time needs to shift. And hopefully we also see a little bit more pressure applied in that way with map design. Because right now there are lots of maps where there's not a lot of risk associated with not keeping track of what's going on above you. And I'd like to see that shift over time, for sure. Okay, last thing, and then we'll call this segment a day. I want to talk just about character features and ults. And I think we can actually look a lot to Blizzard's other games for some design and ability philosophy here. We've got lots of different styles of characters in the game right now, right? Characters that have snares like Mei, characters that have stuns like Reinhardt's Earth Shatter, characters that have the ability to hold a enemy in place, Junkrat's trap, stuff like that. There's lots of ways that we can control characters, and then all the different ults, right? Ults that have different effects on the game, whether they're healing or damage or controlling movement. There's a good variety, I think, right now. So I want to know from you guys, what obvious gaps do you see here? Like, what ult would you love to see added to the game? Let's go that route. What ult that doesn't exist today would you love to see in Overwatch from a new character? Jimmy.
Okay, so what I was thinking when I first kind of saw this was, I don't know why, but Tassadar really came to mind here. And you were talking about taking other games' abilities. He has this ability called Oracle where he can see vision in a wider range around him. And I would love to see kind of a support-esque character like that. I mean, we were even talking about making maybe a utility character. Maybe this could fill that gap. But give another hero some sort of vision besides the ultimate of Widowmaker and the vision of Hanzo would be really cool. Being able to like really choose when and where that extended vision comes from. Obviously, it would need to have a pretty large cooldown for it to really be balanced, but I think stuff around vision would be really cool to play with and have as a utility support type role here. And that's something that would just interest me. And when we've talked about this before in the past, stealth as well is something they could play with. It's very
He said
Kinda
it. He said the
hairline
S
scary?
word. He said
Use
the S word.
Yeah, I know. But it's something that could be done well, but it also could be very scary for newer players to play against something like that.
For sure. Jim or John, what do you think?
Man, this is tough. I've been trying to rack my brain around different things I would like to see. I think there's a couple of cool things that might be kind of cool. Like, imagine like kind of like a team teleport almost, where you can kind of move and manipulate your team around a map. Obviously, not very far, but even imagine being able to lift your team up to the top of a bell tower or something like that, and be able to have everyone kind of go down there. So something where it's not like a true teleporter, but something that you can move around, and I think that would be kind of cool to see. Man, though, this is really tough for me. This is one of the hardest ones I've had. I feel like you guys who have played a lot of Heroes would have like awesome ideas for this, because I feel like Heroes of the Storm is like a gold mine for a lot of the different things that could be done in Overwatch. Kev, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I don't know that there's a ton to be said for cribbing too heavily from MOBAs, in the sense that there's a lot of variables, including the extra axis that just don't exist in a traditional MOBA. Having said that, I do think that, you know, Jimmy's example of having something like a force wall from Tassadar is probably a good one. For me, I think I don't want them to add more alts that have direct damage effects. I think we have enough alts right now that really do explosive damage. Whether it's a 76 alt or a McCree or a Pharah, they've hit a lot of the obvious ways to deal large amounts of damage in short amounts of time, right? Whether that's the one shot from McCree, or it's being able to guarantee headshots from 76. Like they've done a good job of giving people ways to kill people, and I don't think we're short on those right now. I'd like to see more alts that disrupt the game, and what I mean by that is I would love to see the opposite of a Zarya alt. I would love to see an ability that after a couple of seconds of delay blew up and knocked everyone away from it massively. Think like using a Junkrat mine but doubled. And just so you could actually set that up, right? Zarya ults holds everybody in position. You drop this other ult and it blows everyone away. And that would buy you time to sort of disperse a team. It would give you the opportunity to knock them off of an objective really easily and stop them from contesting a point. Stuff like that I think would be cool. But I'm not in a hurry to see them do more damage. I'm not in a hurry to see that at all. I like the utility idea, and I like the idea of introducing characters who maybe, because they don't get a damage-driven ult, deal a little more routine damage because of that, right? They're more useful in the fight because their regular left-click attack is slightly better, and they get that at the expense of having an ult that is utility-driven and allows them to manipulate the battlefield without just, you know, jumping in and being Reaper 2.0.
I definitely think ways to make your team work together, right? Are really cool ults to begin with. For example, Zarya. Zarya's ult is virtually pointless if you don't have your teammates around to help do something with, or to have, you know, another ult to combo with. And I think that's cool. It's one of the reasons why she doesn't see a lot of play, because there are a lot of individual ults, and there's other reasons, of course, but I think that's one of the reasons where it requires that extra coordination, and then you have to blow two ults to do something that one Junkrat ult can do a lot of the time. But I think I really like the idea of those more coordinating ults, things that on their own are only so powerful, but together, you know, really like can synergize with multiple ults. I think is a great way to go for Overwatch.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, I'm pretty confident in saying that we're going to see more of that. I think there's enough characters in the game already for the solo queue player who can grab a 76 or a Junkrat or a Pharah or a Reaper, and they can go in and use their ult independently and have the effect they want to have. So there's that, right? That's an option for them. But for the coordinated player long term, I think we do want to see some ults that maybe don't look as flashy, but have that big bottom line impact on coordinated team gameplay that a lot of the existing ones don't.
Sure. Whew. Kevin, what else? Is there anything else you think we should add to this one here?
I mean, Jimmy kind of touched on bringing something in from another game already. Is there something you guys have seen in, WoW or Heroes of the Storm or some other Blizzard game that you'd like to see done in Overwatch, like a specific kit you can think of that we could bring over? Jimmy, thoughts?
We've touched on this in the past, but maybe a really crazy hero concept where like two players are playing that same hero, like almost like a tank style hero where one controls the mobility and the other controls the turret on the top or something like that. Obviously that would be really challenging the balance and make sure you're giving them enough damage without giving them too much damage, but that is something I think we've touched on before and is something that I know Blizzard is willing to do, obviously because of their work in Heroes of the Storm so far.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with you there. John, what would you do?
Oh, pass. I don't know. Pass. You guys are, I'm trying to think through all like the cool Hearthstone type stuff, because I feel like there's some cool stuff. I was like, what if your ultimate did random damage to, like, imagine like a Ragnaros effect or something like that? Like there's some really cool things that you could do, or, an ability where you have like these 3 little bombs or whatever that just, heat seek to the closest opponent or something like that. I think there's a lot of cool things that you could do there, but I don't know, man. You guys play all the really tactical games that have really cool ideas for that. So I mostly pass.
Mostly pass. Okay. Like I said, because I'm just interested in more disruption, I would love to see, we already have Roadhog with kind of the classical hook, but I would love to see some of the inverse ones. I'd love to see the life grip style ability from Priest in Warcraft, where you can grab an ally and pull them to you. So somebody jumps in, uses a big ult, blows up a bunch of enemies, and then before they die, you just rip them out of that situation, get them safe again. Something like that I think would be really cool. In general, I'm really looking forward to what they can do with movement. And the engine feels so smooth right now that it feels like they maybe have the flexibility to be a little experimental with movement in particular. So that's the one place I would like to see more stuff happen. And in particular, that rescue an ally thing. As somebody who ends up playing support a fair bit, I'd like to be able to prevent my teammates from being their own worst enemies.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, we got to get out of here. We had a full freaking show this week. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us for episode number 27. It's been a blast. Here's the 27 more. Before we get into all the closing stuff, let's jump into some iTunes reviews. Jimmy, you want to take those away?
Yeah, from the good old United States of America, we have JCoff77. Thank you so much for your iTunes review. It helps us out so much in growing the show and getting the show out to more listeners and viewers. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And let's go into some shout outs. Oh, actually, before we do it, thank you for your emails. We love your emails. So if you want to send us more emails, more questions, more ideas for topics on the show, more corrections on things that we forgot to say, and the 21 different heroes with all their different abilities, send us those to thepayload@blizzpro.com. Let's go into some shout outs for the week. Kev.
Yeah, it was a big week. Like I said, did the big trip to Ottawa. Had a really cool opportunity to speak to a bunch of people about where esports is headed. So that was a lot of fun. And I really hope I'll have some stuff to share about that with you guys in the not so distant future. If hearing about that kind of stuff intrigues you, easiest place to keep in touch is just follow me on Twitter @lackofrealism. Big shout outs, I guess, this week to all the people who have been messaging me to play Overwatch on Xbox. I do get your messages, I promise. I've been busy, I've been away, but if you want to play Overwatch on Xbox, I don't have a ton of friends on the Xbox platform playing, so it's nice to log into Overwatch on PC and have 30 friends to play with. But if you want to play on Xbox with me or any of the other people that we know who are into it, hit me up on Twitter @lackofrealism. Mention or DM me with your tag. Let's get on there and let's get into it.
Awesome. What about you, Jimmy?
Just thank you everyone who supports the show, and it's been really fun playing this last week. The side effect of being sick was that I got to play a lot of Heroes and a lot of Overwatch, so it's been really fun, and it sucks a little bit getting back in the swing of things, but yeah, Overwatch is amazing. That's all I got for this week.
Awesome. Well, as for me, I'm getting back to my normal streaming schedule, including right after the show tonight. So if you want to catch me playing lots of Overwatch, I got Katie into Destiny, which is pretty cool. So we're running through Destiny content together. That's a lot of fun. So we're just streaming all that kind of stuff. You can find that out at twitch.tv/kickedtripod. Obviously, well met on Sunday night, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at twitch.tv/blizzpro for all of our Hearthstone shows and stuff like that. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, let's go ahead and get out of here. So, you can find more Overwatch stuff throughout the week at overwatch.blizzpro.com. And a big thank you to Jake Buttineau at jakebuttineau.ca for our awesome music. And of course, scythedesigns.com for our logo. Find us on Twitter at Payload Podcast and email us thepayload@blizzpro.com. And of course, your iTunes reviews are so greatly appreciated. Find us on iTunes, Stitchers, Podcast Addict, and of course, Google Podcast. This has been episode number 27. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.
The Payload is a production of BlizzPro. Find out more about Overwatch at overwatch.blizzpro.com. You can find your host throughout the week on social media. Find Jimmy on Twitter at DJ Tyrant, Kevin on Twitter at Lack of Realism, and John on Twitter at Kicked Tripod.